Anyway, good afternoon. Welcome to our teleconferencing Ring Central meeting, and thank you for joining us. Before we get started, I wanted to provide a reminder on how we're handling public comment for these remote meetings. If you wish to provide remote telephonic public comment, please make sure that you email Claudia by 2:15. Please make sure that you indicate the agenda item that you wish to speak about and you name a telephone number in your request so the staff can unmute your line when it's time for public comment. As we move through the agenda, Ms. Rodriguez will call out each speaker, unmute their line, and allow them 3 minutes to provide comments. Now, we're also accepting written comments, and all written comments should be emailed to Ms. Rodriguez before the conclusion of the meeting. They will be included in the record of this meeting. So we had our roll call, and I'll ask all of you to join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And we'll go right along then to, let's see, our minutes of
public comment.
President,
sorry.
Unagendized public comment.
Sorry, I have like 15 different things in front of me, and none of them have the agenda. Okay, now's the time for us to receive comments from the public on any issue that's not on the agenda today. So I'll ask Ms. Rodriguez if we have any comments, and as I mentioned, just please let her know so she can unmute you, and we'll hear your comments. Do we have any right now, Ms. Rodriguez?
Director Estremera, we have not received any comments. At this point, the only thing that we did receive via email was a letter from Terraland Group, which we have recorded and filed.
Thank you. Okay, if there's any questions, let us know. And so we'll move right along then to our, we were just on it, the minute from our last meeting.
Move approval of the minutes from June 18th meeting.
Yes, there's a motion and a second. It's a motion and a second then for approval. We'll have a roll call, please.
Director Estremera?
Aye.
Director Atwater?
Aye.
Director Blois?
Aye.
Director Palmer?
Yes.
All right.
Great, thank you. Then we'll move right along to our next item.
Can you scroll, Claudia?
Yeah, we can.
There we go.
Can you see, is there a delay in the screen?
Well,
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, you're just on the previous page of the agenda. There we go. We're ready.
Okay. Catano, did you want to bring up your slides?
Catano?
Oh, I was muted.
Okay, you're ready.
Yes, so this is just a presentation of our investment policy. We do this annually. And this time we made a few changes just to reflect any changes in the California code. But we also bring in this because the board has to direct us to invest the funds and also give the delegation to the treasurer. So the key things that we changed really were minor changes to some of the items that we use for investment, bankers acceptance, commercial paper, time deposits. Most of those changes were really to align with our current investment policy and also to align with any changes with the California code. Another item that we changed was our local investment fund, LAIF, which is we invest regularly. They do change their allowance. Right now it's $65 million, but off and on they will make periodic changes, and we wanted the language to really reflect that whatever changes they make, we will adapt those instead of coming and putting a specific number to the policy. And additionally, we looked at some of the key areas, and this is really looking forward to having a lot of money. Right now, a lot of money will be just in a savings, not a savings, but a money market account within our bank. But eventually, when we start having money, we would want all these things to be able to invest in this particular instruments. So the municipal bond notes did not have any limits. We thought we should limit that equally to 5% per issuer. We wanted to increase CAMP, which is another investment tool similar to LAIF, and give that as a flexibility. So we increased that to 30%. And we had other few changes that were just really procedural. So we wanted to make sure that we reflected that in this policy. So we're asking for approval of the statement of investment policy for 2020, 2021. We're also seeking delegation authority to the treasurer to invest funds for DCA for 2020, 2021. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
No, I'll make a motion to approve the new investment policy.
Motion for approval. Second?
Second.
Motion is second. Any further questions? Okay, those for the motion will say aye when called on, so we'll have a roll call, please.
Claudia?
Director Estamera,
Aye.
Director Outwater,
Aye.
Director Blois,
Aye.
Director Palmer.
Aye.
All right.
All right, the ayes have it. So
Yeah, the ayes have it.
We'll move right along to
Thank
7A under discussion items. It's the biannual Board of Directors officer appointments and resolution updating the bylaws regarding officer terms.
Thank you, President Estamera. I'll be presenting this item for staff.
Thank you, Josh.
This is the biannual officer reorganization. So in the joint powers agreement, the offices of president and vice president serve for 2-year terms, and those offices are rotated among the member agencies. And based on the rotation, the offices for years 3 and 4 will be president, will be Metropolitan Water District, which will be Director Atwater. And then for vice president, the JPA currently identifies Kern County Water Agency to fill that spot. But the JPA does indicate that rotation can be amended by this board by a unanimous vote. So, in light of the fact that Kern County Water Agency has not joined the DCA, we do need to fill the vice president spot for this rotation. And so what staff is recommending the board consider is an update to the bylaws just to clarify a couple of things related to this issue, and one I'll get to. So on this issue, what staff's recommending and consistent with the joint powers agreement is we would amend the bylaws to clarify that if for some reason, if one of the agencies which is specified in the rotation of officers has not joined the DCA, that seat would be filled by unanimous vote of the board of directors, and it would be filled until and unless that agency joined the DCA, in which case they would have the option of having their appointees serve the remainder of that specified term. The other issue in the bylaws that staff's recommending the board consider updating is just how the years are calculated for that rotation. So it currently now just refers to year 1, 2, years 3, 4. Staff recommends the board consider doing that on a fiscal year basis. It'll just be a little bit easier for us to do that July 1 to June 30, consistent with the other processes we have. Right now, the agency was formed in May, so technically it would be a calendar May to May. But from our perspective, putting it on a fiscal year basis would be a little bit easier for us to administer. In addition to the bylaws update, this item is the actual appointment of all of the officers that are appointed by the board of directors. So in addition to the vice president, the board always has the ability to appoint the secretary and treasurer. And those offices serve at the pleasure of the board, and they also serve a 2-year term. So with that, there are actually at least two action items before you right now. The first would be consideration of the resolution that we put before you to update the bylaws on the what happens if there's a vacancy, as well as having officer terms be calculated on a fiscal year basis. Staff would recommend the board consider taking that item first because it will affect the second item. And then once that resolution is considered, then it would be to open up the floor for nominations and appointment of a vice president, a secretary, and a treasurer for fiscal year 2020-2021 and 2021-2022. Those appointments could be done in a single motion, or they could be done in separate motions. And the only important procedural reminder is that vice president will require a unanimous vote. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yeah, I'm kind of looking at the bylaws, and I think the idea that if say Kern, for example, comes in late, that they get to say, oh well, we want to come in and do this. I mean, I don't think they should have a preference of what position they should be able to hold at that point when they're coming in late. I mean, I think the board at that point should decide where they can be in the scheme of things. But I don't think that it should be automatic that they get to just kind of come in as if they hadn't waited forever to come in.
And that's certainly something for the board to consider. And if you'd like to make that change, Director Palmer, it would be as simple as just deleting the last sentence of section 1 of the bylaw proposal in the resolution.
Okay, let's see. But an entity specifically becomes a member during the term. Yeah, I think that you should just. I would just say that if the entity specified above becomes a member during such term, the entity may elect to have its director fill the remaining term. I don't think we need to do that, because if the entity specified above becomes a member during such term, its position in the role can be determined by the board at that point.
Yeah, and I think the board could consider even just deleting that whole sentence, so that in such event, we would just delete all of that. So it would just read, in the event that one of the above offices cannot be filled as provided because an entity has not yet become a member, the office may be filled by a unanimous vote of the board of directors. And that's consistent with the Joint Powers Agreement.
Yeah, I would just leave that last sentence off.
Yeah, I'll second that. This is Rich, and it's a lot cleaner that way.
I'm assuming that Sarah has made a motion.
Yes, I've made a motion that
Yeah,
we
yes.
do that sentence.
Got it.
Yeah. If it wasn't, it got seconded.
Yeah.
Okay, any questions on it? I agree. So any questions on anything else? Okay, so we'll have a roll call then.
Director Samara.
Aye.
Director Atwater.
Aye.
Director Boyce.
Aye.
Director Palmer.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Great, unanimously. Okay, then we'll now move on. Well, question is whether the new president should take over. As I understood, it was July 1, so we're past that already.
Yes.
Handing over the reins mid-meeting?
This would be sort of the virtual handing of the reins to President Atwater.
Yes.
Okay.
I'd love to shake your hand, Tony, but I will say you're starting in May and July. That's 27 months. You did a fabulous job.
Thank you.
I think you should have a little gavel that marches across the screen.
There you go. That would be appropriate.
Give me a minute and I'll.
There's a meme somewhere for that.
Just got it.
We really appreciate your leadership in starting the organization, and it wasn't easy, but we had some growing pains, but we've come a long way. And a lot of it has to do with your leadership. So thank you again. I think
Thank you.
to give a little presentation to you. I don't know how they do this virtually, but I'm going to let them tee that up for you, Tony, because they're very proud.
Thank
of
you.
I think we need to applaud him.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate
I don't
it.
know how that works with all these computers, you know.
Yeah, that's true. We have to set a standard.
So I'm going to turn that over to Josh or Catherine, who wanted to make a brief presentation to Tony.
Thank you.
Segue.
So I'd just like to echo Director Richard's statement. Tony, you've been very supportive of the DCA and the program. You've provided great leadership and vision as we've moved forward, and it's been an absolute pleasure serving under you as president, and I'm looking forward to Richard continuing in that same vein. I feel fortunate.
You know, Tony, I'm just so happy that I had the chance to get to know you better, and I've learned a lot. I mean, your background and your perspectives have been so valuable, I think, in terms of my perspective overall. So thank you.
Yeah, if I may say something, Director Estamera, I was a little bit concerned the first meeting or two, but you came up to speed quickly and you did a great job. So thanks for your service. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve. Well, I just have my quick 2 cents, and it was really a pleasure serving with all of you as president. I look forward to another great, productive, progressive year. And of course, we got some fantastic professionals on board. We got great leadership. So I think all we can do is improve. And I'm really looking forward to this next year. I think it'll be the most important one of them all. And of course, I look forward to Richard providing us some tremendous leadership. He's got a great reputation. He's had a great career. So we're looking forward to taking advantage of that experience. Thank you all. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're more than welcome. And obviously you earned every bit of it. And with that, we would like to entertain a motion, or do we want to do the officers, the vice president, treasurer, and secretary? My personal suggestion that I would make is that we ought to appoint Sarah as vice president, vice chair, because if you look at the table that we have in front of us,
That's right.
that would normally be the rotation, and you just move her up because Kern County is not a member, and that would be the logic behind it. It's very consistent with the way it was drafted.
So if I may, I would like to move that we appoint Sarah Palmer as our vice president for the next 2-year term.
Second.
Great. Any discussion? Any public comment on this? I need to check with Claudia on all these agenda items. Do you have any asking for public comment?
No public comment yet.
Great. Well, then let's go ahead and do Claudia, call the roll.
Okay. So calling roll for appointment of Director Palmer as VP.
That is- yeah.
Director Atwater.
Aye.
Director Blois.
Aye.
Director Stamera.
Aye.
Director Palmer.
Aye. Thank you.
All right. The ayes have it.
I would like to nominate Director Blois as secretary.
I'll second that. Okay, so we have a motion and a second that Director Steve Boy would be secretary.
I would suggest, Richard, that we expedite it by, in the same motion, appointing Tony Estremera as our treasurer. So we can finish it with one more vote.
Yes.
Yeah.
Steve's done a good job. We'll streamline this. We'll do it all as
So let's amend my motion that it include both of you for Steve Blois as secretary and Tony Estremera as treasurer in one motion.
great. Okay. And again, I can second that, so we can go ahead and call roll call.
All right. Director Atwater,
Aye.
Director Blois,
Aye.
Director Stamera,
Aye.
Director Palmer.
Aye.
All right, unanimous.
Yeah.
Excellent. Now we're moving on to from 7B. The next item in the discussion items are all information items. So I'll turn it over to the staff. I assume Catherine will kick it off and we'll go through each one of those items. But
Sure.
They're all information items.
Correct. So next on the agenda is the July monthly report. Directors, you have a copy of this report. It's representing performance through June of this year, which is the close of our fiscal year. For the year, we have an expected estimate at completion of about $36.5 million and have delivered the overall scope with about 1 week of incurred delay. Team did a very nice job of recouping what was upwards of a 6-week delay earlier in the year. Expenditure for the year was well below our commitment level, largely due to delays in the launch of our field investigation program. Over the next 2 to 3 months, we're going to be closing out the contracts from the previous fiscal year and the task orders and ensuring that we've processed all the residual invoices. And hopefully by September, we can close the books on the last fiscal year with DWR and our treasurer. Next month's report is going to represent the first month of a new fiscal year. So you'll see a new budget, the $34 million that was approved at the last board meeting, and our new baseline schedule representing the new scope of work for our upcoming year. I'd also like to follow up on a DCA funding question that was raised at our last board meeting in June. As you know, the cost of Delta Conveyance project is beneficiary pays, and the public water agencies have been working with DWR to develop a cost allocation methodology for the program. It's my understanding that these efforts are close to being finalized and that the public water agencies will be bringing the terms of that agreement to their respective boards this fall. It's the expectation that they'll simultaneously seek approvals for continued funding of the planning and environmental review process, which includes the engineering design work that the DCA performs. In the meantime, DWR is temporarily supporting the cost of the entire program, both the work by DWR and DCA, and it's also my understanding this funding will be recovered through a combination of PWA funding that's coming up, and then further down the road through the sale of bonds. Just wanted to add that in there. So at this time, I'm glad to answer any questions you may have on the monthly report. Oh, sounds good. Okay, so we can move on. Is that right?
Just one moment. So President Atwater,
Yes.
we did receive an email from OSHA Reserve that she was considering commenting on this item. I haven't received any feedback from her on if she wants to comment or not, but I think maybe we should open it up to her.
Sure. If she'd like to, she can do that. But we also, if she'd like to give us written comments, that's fine too. We'll put it in the.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Catherine, for speaking to the funding question I raised last time. I appreciate that. I think, and maybe this could come in your next month's, packet on this item. I think what would be good and what members of the public and also I think some of the water contractors would like to see is what is the amount that the DWR is going to be putting forward to fund DCA while it waits for the individual contractors to start paying the shares that either are coming through directly the DCA or through their as part of the state water project. So I think that in prior versions of this Section 5 budget chart, you know, it did disclose what had been advanced by DWR so far. But I think now that we're in the new fiscal year, that amount should be disclosed in, you know, the next versions of this bar chart. Thanks.
Well, thank you for those comments, and we will follow up with that. And certainly, Catano in our Treasury report will track very carefully both the DBR advanced contributions and reimbursements and repayments and funding by each of the contractors. So we'll make sure I have that on the agenda for next month.
Okay, the next topic is an update on our geotechnical plan. I'd like to introduce Andrew Finney to you once again. He is our geotechnical lead for the DCA. You may recall a presentation on our geotechnical plan that was presented about the same time last year. I'm hoping we'll have better luck launching this critical program in the upcoming months. The information is invaluable to DCA, to Carrie's environmental planning team, and to the numerous Delta community members who have asked specific questions over the years regarding potential project effects, but that could not be addressed due to minimal availability of geotechnical data. This includes everything from noise levels of pile driving at the intakes, potentially to dewatering methods at some of these construction sites. So once we have the appropriate state and federal authorizations in hand, we hope this work may proceed unimpeded, and it'll be invaluable in answering some of these engineering and environmental questions. So with that, I'd like to hand this over to Andrew Finney to walk through what our proposal is for the upcoming months, make sure that both the board and the public is informed of what we plan to do. And I know that DWR has done some extensive outreach and communication around this upcoming plan as well, just to make sure everyone stays informed. So Andrew, if you would.
Sure. Claudia, next slide, please. So key goals of the geotechnical plan, as Catherine mentioned, we had some delays in the last fiscal year. Our goal this year is to supplement the existing DWR database and address gaps in historical data. We've done quite a bit of research into gathering all of the various data available in the Delta there, subsurface data. We're going to refine, collect additional data to refine our data on the DCP alignments, including the eastern alignment. And additionally, we're going to validate geophysical methods. That's a surface-based series of techniques. We're going to look at for both detecting buried wells as well as essentially understanding subsurface conditions. We're going to determine how effective those are in the Delta, specifically in the Delta conditions, and evaluate some tools that are satellite-based that will allow us to monitor regional subsidence and avoid the need to establish a very large network of settlement monitoring stations. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of information on here, so I'm not going to read it all, but why is this information important to the DCA? So number one is there's very little available data right now on the eastern alignment. We've pulled in such data as water wells, which are often the deepest data in the Delta. But overall, outside of the water wells and any prior work that DWR has performed, there's very little deep subsurface data available in the Delta, and especially on the eastern alignment. We're going to evaluate some of the conditions or explore conditions on the land side of the intake locations. They have very, very large effects on operational and construction watering operations. And so we really need to understand the conditions behind the levees. Previously, we've really only obtained significant data from within the river itself, which may not be representative of the conditions behind the levees. I mentioned we were going to validate geophysical methods for future use. Can these tools be used to supplement and possibly reduce the amount of invasive exploration required? I mentioned also the future planning for regional subsidence. We want to use satellite interferometer, I probably said that wrong. INSAR data is the now for remote detection of settlement, and we think it could be a very valuable tool to the program. And then, Catherine touched on a few of the items. There are specific topics that really need additional data to be able to answer, to refine our answers, suggestions, and design approaches. One of those is the design of the sheet piling at intakes, the cofferdams that are used to construct intakes. We're trying to minimize the amount of pile driving that would, or even eliminate pile driving at those locations. Catherine mentioned the watering methods, and again, that's primarily at the intake locations and some of the South Delta facilities. Be able to validate construction impacts to local levees. That's the topic that keeps coming up again and again. Is what does the construction mean to the existing levees? Do we understand how fragile they are? And we do, but we need site-specific data in order to evaluate that from an engineering standpoint. The program has really made a massive effort to increase tunnel reach lengths, and which in turn reduces public impact at shaft sites. And so we really need additional data to validate that. We're being able to plan, collecting the data to be able to plan for routine, systematic maintenance of the tunnel boring machines is the key to allowing these long tunnel drives. And also I've personally received a lot of comments and questions through the SEC about the environmental characteristics of the RTM, the reusable tunnel materials. And we need to collect additional data, perform additional studies to validate our initial findings, and with particular focus on a number of soluble metals such as methyl mercury. Next slide, please. There we go. So this is sort of the image there sort of summarizes some of the large data gaps, and obviously the eastern alignment. What it shows is historic subsurface information through either soil borings or CPTs, cone penetrometer tests that are greater than 150 feet in depth, and that's just really the sweet spot for the tunnel vertical alignment. Is we need information at least to 150 feet. And we've had some excellent interagency cooperation in obtaining data, subsurface data, but you can still see there's large gaps between Lower Roberts Island and the northern part of the Delta. Some smaller gaps on the central alternative, gaps at the intakes, and then some gaps down at the southern forebay site location. I mentioned earlier we have pulled in a significant amount of existing data, and we've used that data to help guide the exploration and guide any input to the current environmental documents. We've pulled in information from wells in terms of water quality, water levels, environmental reporting where there were cleanup sites throughout the Delta. We've pulled that information in. And again, I mentioned and Caltrans from bridge construction. And I mentioned we've had some excellent as well. Next slide, please. So again, lots of words on this slide, but the image here are the explorations that are addressed in what we call the 2019 ISMND. So the initial study mitigated neg-dec or negative declaration. There are, you can see there's a series of overwater borings, land borings, and then this cone penetrometer test. And it was really set up to, as I initially came and spoke to you at one of the very first board meetings, set up to understand conditions across the entire Delta to guide the environmental planning process for any future Delta conveyance project. For fiscal year 2021, we obviously don't have funding to complete all of these explorations, and so they'll be limited to a subset of sites that are based on accessibility, availability, environmental permitting, and things like that. Next slide, please, Claudia. So here are some specifics about the current exploration program for 2021, and this is a somewhat of a fluid map, if you will, or fluid situation. There are 8 overwaters currently in our fiscal year budget, and 58 land borings and additional 68 CPTs. A number of these have some of the earlier highest priority. I believe 11 of the explorations that are not overwater will be conducted by a consultant working directly for DWR, and the remainder will be completed by a consultant working directly to for the DCA. I don't need to mention the geophysical test program, again, is primarily focused, or is focused on Bolden Island. And then an INSAR settlement study will be focusing on 3 of the Delta Islands to determine whether we can detect changes in essentially ground surface over periods of time using satellite-based data. Next, I should mention here also, there's a note at the bottom of the slide that DWR is also completing concurrently their court-ordered soil surveys, which was initially delayed by county litigation. And it was obviously for a separate project, and it was approved in 2010. And they will be completing that work in late July, starting that work in late July and finishing in mid-September. So that's not shown, it's not part of the DCA exploration for this fiscal year. Next slide, please, Chloe. A very general schedule of when we're planning to conduct these explorations. So we're talking about planning for, and we've broken it down. The light gray is the DWR sort of high priority top 11, we call them, and then the darker gray is the overall fiscal year 2021 DCA exploration program. So planning is ongoing now, along with encroachments and access negotiations will begin in July, and then exploration is expected to start somewhere in September timeframe there. And I believe, is that the last slide? Yeah. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer those.
Oh, I do.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew, very much for that presentation. And Sarah, go ahead.
Okay, because this is a public document, when you say CPD, could you maybe make a little asterisk or something to say it's cone penetration test or something like that, and that way people will know what that is?
Sure, we can do that.
Any other questions? Seeing none, Andrew, good job, really thorough presentation. We look forward to hearing from you next month.
Nicely done.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Let's move on to 7D.
President Atwater, I actually would request that we actually go back to 7A. I apologize. We have one loose end to tie up there.
Okay, sure.
You moved so quickly through the through that last motion. I didn't get a chance to jump in and to double check the joint powers agreement. And the JPA section 11.4 actually requires that the treasurer be the treasurer of a member agency or a certified public accountant. We will need Catano or someone like that to serve as treasurer. And again, I apologize for not catching that while you moved through quickly, but I did want to double check the JPA to make sure I was remembering that correctly. So we would need a motion to reconsider the appointment of treasurer.
Make a motion that we reconsider that.
Second.
Okay, we have a second by Director Boyd. Roll call, please, Claudia.
Director Atwater.
Aye.
Director Boyce.
Aye.
Director Estremera.
Aye.
Director Palmer.
Aye.
All right, unanimously.
And I make a motion
Sure. Sarah, go ahead.
that Caetano be named as the treasurer.
Second.
Does that need a motion? She is already treasurer.
It does need a motion, Director Boyce, because the
Good.
JCA provides that the treasurer serves 2-year terms. So I
Great.
would request a motion, please.
Perfect, thanks.
Okay, so we have to redo that every 2 years, just like the other officers. Got it. All right, Claudia, please call the roll.
All right, Director Atwater.
Aye.
Director Boyce.
Aye.
Director Estremera.
Aye.
Director Palmer.
Aye.
Okay. The ayes have it, unanimously.
Yes, I think we all recall that Caetano was our treasurer, but then we got into officers and appointing the board. I think we,
It was confusing.
yes. And it varies. I know at our local water boards, we sometimes appoint an officer to be treasurer or delegate it to staff. It varies from different districts. Let's move on then now to 7D, the Tunnel Independent Technical Report. Who's going to give that presentation?
So part of our commitment to transparency, we once again want to share with you the findings in response to an independent technical review that was convened to continue to study our tunnel concept design. This is the second ITR held on the tunneling, and it's obviously a reflection of our commitment to seek the very best ideas, both nationally and globally, to ensure the quality of the design. Presenting today is Steve Dudnovich, who is our tunnel lead. He has 30 years of tunneling design and construction management experience, particularly focused on large diameter soft ground tunneling projects similar to the characteristics of the Delta Conveyance. So Steve, I hand the microphone over to you.
Hey, thanks, Catherine. So I would like to thank you for having me here today, and I appreciate having the opportunity to speak and present to the board as well as members of the public that are present. Next slide, Claudia. So as Catherine had mentioned, this is the second ITR we've had, which took place in May on the Delta Conveyance tunnels. The first one took place back in December of last year, and the purposes of why we have these ITRs remain the same and as indicated on the slide. So I'm not going to repeat these purposes again, but in summary, why we do them is because ITRs have become standard practice in our industry, and they represent the best practice in capital program delivery for large infrastructure projects like Delta Conveyance. Next slide. So the most current ITR members represented a diverse group of individuals with different areas of expertise. Dan Adams, whom we met on in the first ITR meeting, also participated in this review as well. His specialty is in the design and construction of tunnels. Dr. Ed Corden, specialty is in the design and construction of underground structures as well as soil structure interaction in soft ground applications. Doug Harding works for the Robbins Company, and he brings a wealth of expertise when it comes to tunnel boring equipment. Dr. Greg Corbin, expertise lies in geotechnical engineering related to underground works and has been involved with numerous tunneling projects. Dr. Alkreich Rem, he brings the international expertise to the team and specializes in TBMs and risk management of underground projects. And lastly, we have John Kennisher, who has extensive experience in design and construction of tunneling projects with similar challenges to the ones we'll be facing. Next slide, please. So in preparation of the ITR meeting, the members were provided a number of documents, including reports, technical memorandums, and drawings. And we asked them to review these documents and provide recommendations or feedback based on the 8 scope items listed on the slide, which I'm going to go through briefly. The members, first one, the members were asked to provide feedback on the length of our tunnel reaches. Presently, the Delta conveyance system consists of 6 tunnel reaches, and a tunnel reach is defined as a length of tunnel between the TBM launch shaft and reception shaft. Next, the members were asked to review and provide comments on the central and eastern alignments from a geotechnical and logistical standpoint. They were given the construction schedule to review and they were to identify any issues that may exist with the way we sequence our construction activities. Since the tunnels will be operating with a net internal pressure, we also had them review our conceptual design for the tunnel lining. And moving along, there's going to be a large amount of RTM that will be generated on this project, so we asked them to provide feedback on the logistical issues associated with transporting and processing the RTM. And they also provided feedback on contract packaging. And lastly, they were asked for recommendations related to operation and maintenance needs for the tunnels once the system reaches the operation phase. Next slide. So this table that we have on the screen right now, this summarizes the number of comments or recommendations that were made by the ITR team. As you can see, we received a number of comments back on all the Skype items that we requested feedback on. And so in the next series of slides, I'll go into each one of these in a bit more details. More detail on the comments that they made, but due to time constraints, I'm only going to focus on 5 key scope items that are listed in this table. Next slide. So in terms of the tunnel reaches, the ITR team felt lengths up to 15 miles long excavated with a single TBM was practical. So as long as maintenance is performed on a regular basis and a new TBM is used. The reason, they had a couple of main reasons for this. One was that one main reason was based on the life of the main bearing, which is the most critical component of the TBM, because typically TBM manufacturers guarantee the main bearing for a minimum of 20,000 working hours, which far exceeds the time to excavate a 15-mile long tunnel, which makes these distances feasible. They also stated there's precedence with tunnels longer than 15 miles that have been excavated in rock. And because of this, the components associated with hard rock tunnels have to be much more robust compared to soft ground tunnel TBMs, which also reinforces why the 14 to 50 mile long tunnels are practical. For their next opinion, the reviewers felt when larger repairs are required, and especially if the tunnel is excavated in abrasive ground conditions, maintenance shafts spaced at every 4 to 6 miles is reasonable. They felt having these shafts allows the work to be performed more safely in atmospheric conditions, and any large TBM components that may need to be replaced can be done in the shaft. An example of this would be like the cutter head of the TBM. And their third opinion or recommendation, they felt that to deal with the unanticipated TBM breakdowns in between the maintenance shafts, they recommended that the TBMs be equipped to have capabilities to construct underground safe havens so that maintenance can be performed entirely from within the tunnel and not requiring a shaft from the surface. They felt this was very important to plan to have this planned ahead for the TBM to have this sort of capability, because once these machines are launched into the ground, you have very few options that you could do in terms of what can be modified on the TBM. So moving to our responses for the first 2 items, our current tunnel reach lengths and shaft spacing shown on the drawings are consistent with the ITR recommendations. In terms of regular maintenance on a TBM, we have included an advance rate of 4 hours between the main working shifts where this work is performed. We've also included provisions in the schedule for weekend maintenance. So we are in full agreement that preventive maintenance work needs to be performed on a regular basis because it reduces the risk of these breakdowns, unanticipated breakdowns, significantly. So in terms of providing capability to the TBM to perform major interventions or maintenance to the TBM cutter head or face from within the tunnel, we also agree with this idea. Just like to let you guys know, TBM technology is constantly changing and improving. And due to the lengths of these tunnels, we're going to need state-of-the-art tunnel boring machines on our project to be successful. We have members of our team have strong relationships with TBM manufacturers, and we work closely with contractors that use this technology all the time. So any new technologies that may be developed in the future will definitely be incorporated into our designs. Next slide, please. So for the next scope item, the ITR did not recommend one alignment over the other due to limited amount of geotechnical data that was available for the eastern alignment. However, they felt further refinement of the alignments can be made as updated geotechnical data becomes available. Also, gas well locations are identified and community challenges are addressed. By refining alignments, they felt that the conflicts could be avoided, which would help minimize delays during construction. They recommend raising the vertical profile of the tunnel alignment approximately up to 1 tunnel diameter. The reason for this, so the tunnel would be shallower and they could perform maintenance on the tunnel boring machine at lower pressures. So we agree that that further geotechnical fieldwork and other studies are needed to finalize the alignment prior to construction. The current alignments that we show are based on the best information that we had at the time. As Andrew had mentioned in the previous presentation, we're planning our next phase of field work to start later this year, and the information that we'll collect will be data that will fill in gaps along critical locations, particularly the eastern alignment, where we have less information. In terms of raising the alignment, we also agree with this recommendation, and we will investigate this further in future design phases. At the moment, the vertical line is controlled by the depth dictated by the Port of Stockton, and they're requiring a minimum clearance of 70 feet below the bottom of the deep river channel that has to be maintained. So we intend on meeting with the port in the future to visit this criteria to see if we could get that changed as well. Next slide, Claudia. Moving down the highlights. So the ITR felt an advance rate of or excavation rate of 40 feet was reasonable based on their experience for large tunnel boring machines that were excavated in similar ground conditions. They recommended that they also recommend that we carefully review the logic that was used for the time required to develop borrow material for the construction of the shaft pads, since there's a lot of moving parts and coordination needed from a logistical standpoint. They recommended that we change the sequence of tunneling of having reach 4 be completed before reach 3 starting. And they felt this would be a benefit because all the RTM generating reach 3 can be transported to the southern forebay through the completed reach 4 tunnel. And this would result with less rail and traffic impacts on the surface. So in terms of our responses, our team spent a significant amount of time studying this, and we feel very comfortable with the logistics associated with bore material movement at the Twin City site and for the construction of shaft pads for all locations. We concluded that we can reduce the time for constructing these shaft pads by including ground improvements underneath the pads. And by doing so, we don't have to wait for the pads to settle and the ground to consolidate, which could take more than a year to occur. In terms of the embankments at the southern forebay, our team performed a detailed mass balance study and looked at every possible combination for the source material to construct these embankments. So we appreciate the reviewers' concerns on these two issues, but given the time frame provided them, just several days, it would have been very difficult for them to look at the same level of detail that we had, where we had, the benefit of several weeks to do the same study. So we feel very confident in our assumptions and durations associated with the construction activities that are contained in our current schedule. And moving on to their last recommendation, we disagreed with this idea of completing Reach 4 before starting Reach 3. For instance, on the eastern line, this would extend the construction duration by an additional 3 to 4 years. In addition, on the central alignment, we would need a launch shaft at the Bacon Island shaft site. And for you who are familiar with Bacon Island, this is a very difficult location to gain access to. So we felt the better solution was to take advantage of the existing railroads that ran adjacent to the I-5 to transport the RTM from the Twin Cities site to the southern forebay. And the other good thing that comes out of this, it just not only does it accelerate the schedule, it also minimizes the amount of truck traffic that would take place on the surface streets. Next slide. So in terms of the reusable tunnel material, RTM, ITR members recommended a test program be established to confirm the assumptions made for the drawing process. They were concerned any delays in the processing of the RTM could impact the schedule. And they also recommend that we look into other natural drawing methods. So our team agrees that RTM testing program for drawing is necessary, since it will confirm a lot of our assumptions, such as effectiveness of this technology, number of dryers needed, and rate of drawing. One point I would like to make, though, even though this technology has not been used on past tunneling projects, our project is very unique, where we could benefit greatly from this technology. So even though mechanical dryers have not been, used on tunneling projects in the past, this technology has been extensively used in more demanding environments, such as chemical, petrochemical, and in the mining industry. So regardless, we're going to confirm that this technology is suitable for our application and hope to commence testing sometime next year. In terms of our other natural drawing processes, our current design includes space for natural drawing as well, which provides additional reliability and flexibility in drawing the RTM. But based on our studies to date, we have determined that the mechanical drawing requires the smallest footprint, and it's the quickest way to achieve optimum moisture content needed so that we could use this material sooner for the construction of the embankments at the southern forebay. So the last scope item that's covered in this presentation is on this slide is the operation and maintenance issues associated with the tunnels and shafts. The ITR panel recommended that for post-construction that the location and final size of these shafts be large enough to provide reasonable access to perform inspections, repairs, and maintenance activities as needed. They also recommended that the final size and height of these shaft pads be consistent with future O&M requirements. In terms of maintenance shaft locations, we have them spaced at 4 to 6 miles apart for construction, and the spacing also meets the long-term operation maintenance inspection needs for the tunnel facilities. Through this entire process, we've met with DCA, who are coordinating with DWR for field maintenance staff. Basically coordinating with the DWR field staff to discuss the requirements, and what we show currently on our drawings meets or exceeds their minimum requirements for parking equipment operation and material laydown so that the work can be performed in an efficient and safe manner. Also, our current shaft spacing does not exceed the maximum lengths allowed for remote operated vehicle inspection. This is very important because since we don't want to shut down these tunnels every time when we perform these inspections. So since the ITR meeting in May, we made great progress by reducing the shaft pad heights and the footprints at all of our shaft locations, and confirm they still meet the minimum requirements needed for O&M activities. We've also completed our hydraulic analysis for surge, and the shaft size shown in our current drawings are the minimum needed to accommodate the expected surge pressures that would be experienced on our system, and these sizes still maintain or satisfy the minimum requirements needed for O&M activities. So this is my last slide, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. I got to apologize on that last slide. I think I didn't say change the slide, and it was a bit of a delay there.
Well, thank you very much, Steve, for the detailed presentation. Just wanted to check with Claudia, is there any inquiry from the public? Any questions about the tunnel design and the technical review?
Director Atwater, we have not received any public comments or requests for public comment.
There's a lot there, and Steve did a wonderful job, but I'll ask the board, do they have any questions or comments about his presentation?
Yes, I have a comment or a question. Great presentation. I really appreciate it. It was thorough and well thought out. Are these experts generally going to be available in the future? Do we have them on retainer, or are they just, will they be available?
Yeah, my understanding, and Catherine could chime in, but my understanding, like I said, this was our second one, and moving forward, we're going to be meeting them, I think, at least twice, if not 3 times a year, depending on our deliverables. So, yes, we're going to have input with them throughout the entire process.
Excellent, thanks.
Good.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in here is this particular ITR had a different focus. It was slightly more academic, and it was nice to have that balance between the heavily concentrated contractor focus in the very first one around building things to more emphasis on the design and the geotechnical conditions. So we plan to keep mixing it up depending on what the circumstances in, but all the participants are really eager to participate.
Good. That's good to hear. Any other questions from the board? Seeing none, why don't we move up to the next item, 7E, the DCA Leadership Spotlight. Gwen.
Okay. Yeah, so periodically I'd like to use these board meetings opportunity to introduce some of our key staff working on the project, give you a sense of the team and also the public a sense of the depth and the breadth of the experience of our team. I've worked in public infrastructure for 30 years, and I believe the team that we've assembled here is some of the most talented in the industry. And I'd put Gwen Buchholtz right there front and center as a pinnacle of her profession. So we're lucky to have her. She's helping us guide. She's guiding the engineering work to focus on what's needed for Carrie's team to do the alternatives analysis as part of the EIR process. So with that, I hand it over to Gwen to introduce herself and her team.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, and we're pleased to be here today. Can we go to the next slide, Claudia? Thank you. So we're quickly going to go through who our environmental liaison team is, and what some of our key accomplishments and what our upcoming activities for fiscal year 2021 will be. Next slide. So we've provided an interesting role here as between the DWR environmental in EIR and permit applications work for their DWR environmental planning, and then the DCA engineering. And one of the things that sometimes happens is that the teams that are preparing the EIRs and everybody's under deadline. So the people that have the EIRs and permit applications sometimes don't have enough time to go through all the details of all of the engineering drawings, and vice versa. The engineering teams not necessarily have access to know all the details that are needed for those EIR and permit applications. So we form the environmental liaison between those teams. Our team includes myself, Gwen Buchholtz, Karen Asquin, who will be presenting in a minute. And this summer, we're incredibly lucky to have a UC Davis student, Claire Bjork, who is she's being great and helping out, putting together a lot of our permit criteria in the permit handbook. Next chart, please. So just a little bit about myself. I have over 43 years of experience. My undergrad's in physics. My graduate degree is in civil environmental engineering from UC Davis. I'm a registered civil engineer. And I have a wide range of projects over 43 years, ranging from hydraulic modeling, both surface water, groundwater, water systems, wastewater. I've done a lot of modeling for Santa Clara Valley Water District, Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District, Monterey County, pipeline and pump station designs and conveyance designs, conveyance system master plans, and some habitat restoration projects, including the Salton Sea Ecosystem Restoration EIR. I was the project manager for the consulting team for DWR. But probably one of the two big items that helped me do my job for you guys is becoming a permit engineer on design and construction projects, and also doing a lot of environmental documentation over the past 36 years. Done permit engineering on pipelines and stormwater projects that have ranged from Alaska to Phoenix to New Orleans. Closer to home, I was a permit engineer on Santa Teresa Water Treatment Plant for Santa Clara Valley Water District, and Twin Oaks Water Treatment Plant for San Diego County Water Authority. I've also worked on, over the last 36 years, one of the things that happened is I was doing permit engineering frequently during design and construction. We would have to do a supplemental environmental document, and it became expedient for me to understand what was in those EIRs and EISs and permits so that we could actually pull that together as part of the design and construction management teams. And about 36 years ago, I also started working for the Bureau of Reclamation and Department of Water Resources on a series of environmental impact statements between both the engineering processes and the environmental work. Also had the opportunity to be the project manager for the consulting team for the Delta Stewardship Council preparation of the original Delta plan and the EIR. Next chart. Specifically, what's helped me perfect what I'm working for you guys on Delta Conveyance was that way back in the 1990s, I became the project manager for the Central Valley Project Improvement Act, EIS, which was the first project in which we had Endangered Species Act issues with Samanids and Delta Smelt and many other water. This was the project that started the changes on reliability issues for the State Water Project and Central Valley Project. I also worked on CalFed's EIR, EIS, and then subsequently continued to work with the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, WaterFix EIR, EIS since 2006. And then now, since last year, I'm the environmental liaison through the DCA. What this has helped me with is because, first of all, I'm the project historian, I think. And that allows us to provide information to the teams to avoid duplication and also sort of give them a basis of further analysis. But we also want to make sure that we're looking at each thing in a new light, because it's not just the old projects anymore. Each project's different. We're learning each time as we go through. It's been fabulous to watch the evolution of this project over the years. And so with that perspective, I'm hoping to continue to help the Delta Conveyance project move forward into completion. I'd like to have Karen Asquin give us a little bit of her history and career experience.
All right, great. Thank you, Gwen, and thank you to the board for having us. So I'm Karen Asplund, and I work with Gwen on the Environmental Liaison team. A little bit about my background and experience. I got my undergraduate degree in Environmental Science and Management from UC Davis. I worked for a couple of years after that, but then I did get my Master's of Environmental Science and Management from the Bren School at UC Santa Barbara. And while I focused on water resources management at Bren, this was a really interdisciplinary program. And that has actually helped me a lot as the environmental liaison, because I do communicate and work with so many different technical teams. Having that interdisciplinary background has been very helpful. So a bit about my career. After graduating from UC Davis, I moved to San Francisco and worked as an intern at first at Environmental Defense Fund, also known as EDF. And so I was an intern, and I did become full-time eventually. And I primarily worked on wildlife and water conservation issues. After that, I got my San Francisco startup experience. I worked at WaterSmart Software. This company provides software to water utilities, and they help people conserve water by using social norms-based messaging. So I don't know if you all remember a couple years back, this was in the news where on some people's water bill, they'd get a little happy face if they used less water than their neighbors. So that was a interesting experience. While I was in graduate, so then after WaterSmart Software, I went back to school. And while I was in graduate school, I worked part-time and remote for DMS Natural Resources. This is a water rights consulting firm based out of Bozeman, Montana. And I worked on primarily on water marketing. It was very interesting. I learned a lot about water rights. Then after grad school, I got a job with Jacobs Engineering. It was CH2M at the time. And while at Jacobs, I've been working on a lot of climate change resiliency projects, as well as construction management, focusing on permitting, and then also environmental compliance and CEQA, NEPA type work. So a couple examples of the projects I've worked on. One was the sea level rise vulnerability and consequences assessment for the City of San Francisco's planning department. Got the page of the report up on the screen. That was just published in February. And then I also worked on San Mateo's Clean Water Program. I did permitting and CEQA compliance for their upgrades to their wastewater treatment plant and collection system. And so that experience in permitting has definitely helped me on this program and the CEQA experience as well. So now I'm full-time on Delta Conveyance. All right, next slide, please. All right, so I know Gwen touched on this earlier, but I'm going to provide a little more information about our roles as the environmental liaison team. So we really facilitate that transfer of information between DWR and DCA and vice versa. So this involves interpreting the engineering information and providing it in a format that's really usable for the CEQA NEPA process and for permitting. We also provide input to our own DCA engineering teams on environmental considerations and how that influences design. So some examples of that can be things like land use and biological concerns. We also work with our engineering teams on permit applications and trainings for field work. So we're doing that right now with Andrew and his team on this upcoming soil investigation work. And then we also work closely with the stakeholder team, providing some input on presentation materials for the SEC meetings, and also some input on responses to stakeholder comments. All right, well, thank you all, and I will pass it back over to Gwen. We can move on to the next slide.
Gwen, you coming back? Did we lose her?
I forgot it. No, I forgot to hit the mute button. And I said really nice things about how fun it is to work with Karen. So,
I guess we'll just have to skip that.
Oh.
yeah, but no, it's a great equal partnership with Karen, and it's really good. So over the last 2019-2020 timeframe, our initial efforts were really sort of to provide the documentation and summarize what has gone on the past 14 years of this project to the engineering teams. So they would wonder, what were some of the critical environmental issues? What do we need to think about as we move forward with design? So we put together a summary memorandum about that. We summarized a lot of what was analyzed and what were some of the results of the concepts as they were presented in the EIR, EIS for BDCP WaterFix. We also provided summaries of input and review of the citing and engineering criteria that we received comments through the previous EIR, EIS process, as well as through the permit application processes that were done before. When we looked at, we also have provided input all along with where we are in lockstep. We attend many, if not most, of the engineering meetings, the engineering design team meetings, so that they can, our input isn't later in the game, it's up front, and so that facilitates an efficient engineering process. In the last few months, what we've been doing is working with the engineering teams as they put together their layouts so that we can put together our documents, which we call templates, which will be used to translate the engineering drawings over into the EIR, EIS teams so they can use it in preparing their chapters of the EIR, EIS. Next slide. Right now we are in July, the first month of this fiscal year. We are completing the templates for the latest alignments and locations of all the facilities. And then we will not only provide one large document for the use of the EIR, then we will provide a series of sub-documents so that each one of the EIR, EIS resource chapters, like land use or transportation or soils and geology, will have that we will be able to point them directly, and we will summarize the information from the larger template and report so that those teams can focus quickly. And they still have the larger template to look at, but they have a very short period of time to prepare an EIR, and we want to make it as efficient as possible for them to understand the project description so they can move directly into impact assessment. We are also providing, over the next year, we anticipate that we'll be providing information for the permit applications if they request it from DCO. We're providing information to the permit applications under the geotech, technical investigations here. As I said before, Claire is working with Karen to prepare a permit handbook for the engineers, so that's a one-stop shop, and it will also then eventually, when we do the handbooks, we let it evolve into the design process at the next phase of the design process to get our final permit, and also it will evolve to be used on the construction management site. And we basically are here to continue to coordinate with all the teams, engineering and environmental, and the SEC, and we're here to help translate this information between the teams. That's all of our presentations, and we're open for questions.
Well, thank you very much, Gwen and Karen. You have an outstanding background, and I've heard your work and seen what you've done for the last 30 years, and so I know how excellent it is. Any questions from the board?
I echo your comments, President Atwater. Outstanding resumes.
Yeah. And Claude, I assume there's no public questions or comments?
There is none.
Okay. Well, then let's move on to 7F, Stakeholder Engagement Committee update. Who's going to give that?
Hi, everyone.
Leslie.
It'll be me.
Ellie, good.
You caught me just as my kid came home and turned on the TV, so I'm relocating.
My dog's squeaking at me too.
That's how it goes. Chair Boyd, welcome. Looking forward to working with you. And Director Shamera, glad you're just moving one square over on my screen. All right, so stakeholder engagement. We had our meeting last month. We have another meeting coming up on next Wednesday, actually. We went over a few things at last month's meeting, just a little refresher course on the Brown Act. And then it was one of our, sort of fairly typical, like dense meetings. The big thing we talked about, in my opinion, you'll see all the updates listed out, but the big one was soil transportation and management. And one of our great engineers, Graham Bradner, gave that discussion. There's a lot of questions and back and forth about soils, moving them, whether or not they can be reused, conditioning, all those things. So it was a long meeting. We also went through a new feature, which I think I spoke about last time, but has been really productive, I think, which is our feedback form. It's basically when we go through our conceptual plans and how they've been changed back. So a lot of SEC members have taken a lot of time and energy to provide us with recommendations on sightings and whatnot. And it's been really great. And I think what's also great is to sort of show what that feedback has done and how it's made us definitely be more creative. It's made us sort of have to think in different ways. But that's exactly the whole point of the SEC, is to sort of get the Delta fingerprints on our work. And again, we come at everything from an engineering and design perspective. So to get information on, sensitive areas or traffic issues from folks who are sort of sitting in traffic all the time and understand that, or any of those other things, has been deeply helpful. We also gave, we had a great presentation by Anacita Augustin from DWR on tribal engagement, just because that's something that folks bring up a lot, and it's a process that's outside of DCA, but it was really great to sort of hear what that process looks like. And it's obviously a fairly confidential process, which I'm not sure that everyone was aware of. We also yesterday, at the behest of Shingle Springs, gave an update to them as well, based on some information. They had a lot of questions from some of the last meetings. So I'm glad that we have started speaking directly, again, at the behest of DWR, with some of the tribes. And that's, again, thanks to one of our SEC members who sits on our council and is a member of tribal government. Moving forward, as I said, we have our meeting next month, and we're trying to figure out some of the things that were discussed from last month, including some recommendations on trying to target communities that are unable to join our SEC meetings because of connectivity and internet issues. Last month, it was looking like things were opening up again a little bit. And I think that's really changed, certainly in Sac County, as infection rates go up. So we are sort of trying to think about, not just in the near future, but it looks like we're in this boat for a little while. And so the whole communications team has been really thinking about what does the next year look like in terms of trying to do meaningful community engagement, given the limitations and possible sort of, again, we've been sort of moving towards things opening up again, and it seems like that's all shrinking down again. So trying to be creative and come up with some ideas there. Our tour, I mentioned that we have a couple tours coming up. Folks wanted to see T-Screen manufacturing in the Delta. There's a factory there that does that. At the feedback from the owner, he had said some of the components had not arrived, and so it'd be better to hold off on the tours. So we will hopefully be doing those tours the first week of August. Again, I need to check in with both the factory owner to see if it's possible to do a fully outdoor tour, and to also check in with the SEC members and our staff who wanted to attend to make sure that it's safe to do so. And then our virtual tours will be done in the next 2 weeks. As I said last time, it was delayed due to updates to the proposed conceptual alignments based on the SEC feedback. So hopefully we get that up. And I'm looking forward to our website being up in the next week or so. We've been working on that for months. Thanks to you all approving a budget for it many, many months ago. Excited that after all this time, we'll have a new website that we think is much more user-friendly, gives everyone access to our information, and will be yet one more tool that we'll be able to use for sort of productive outreach and to help people find our materials and access our things clearly and logically, I guess. And that is it, unless there are any questions.
Oh, thank you so much for that detailed update, Nasli. Any of the board members have any questions? Great job, and we look forward. Obviously, there's a lot going on leading into August, and hopefully we'll hear back from you next month too. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
7G, the Stakeholder Engagement Committee members report out. Do we have a somebody?
I'm so sorry. Yes, I should have introduced them. Very happy to introduce two of our SCC board members. I'm not sure if they flipped the coin or not, but Douglas Shaw is our SCC member representing Sacramento at large, and very happy to introduce David Glosky, who is our at-large Contra Costa representative. So Douglas and David, are you both with us?
I'm here.
Very good. Perhaps you've decided between the two of you who'll go first, so I'll let you go from here. And thank you so much for taking the time to present to us today.
Douglas, do you want to go first? Oh, I think you've got to unmute.
Okay. Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Well, honorable board members, I'd like to thank DCA for having organized all the SEC meetings since December last year. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm honored to be given the opportunity to serve our community. The process has given me invaluable opportunity to learn all about the process and share with my constituents. Well, since the pandemic took place, I've compiled reports of our SEC meetings and posted them on the website of Law Foundation. Then I posted teasers on 6 Delta community Facebook pages so that the readers can click onto the Law Foundation websites to read my full report. And these Facebook pages include the Rotary Club of Warner Grove, the Delta News, Delta Concerns, Delta Legacy Community, Law Foundation, and my own, my personal Facebook pages. Well, we appreciate that the North and South Hall Road to be built along the River Road will probably prevent the disaster of rumbling trucks shaking down the old structure of Lock and Cortland. Either way, the people involved in the Delta Heritage community can breathe a sigh of relief. I learned that the DCA has redesigned the location of central alignment in accordance with our SEC member Sean Reeves' suggestion, making it less harmful to the wildlife near the Staten Island. We see the positive results of the SEC and DCA working together. Well, my heart lies with the Delta Heritage. I would like to take the opportunity to share with you some of the Delta legacy stories. Everyone knows the Lock being the national historical landmark on par with the Golden Gate Bridge. Thousands of Chinese laborers built the 1,000 miles of levee to create the California Delta. The end result is almost 1 million acres of most fertile agricultural land in the country. But few people know about the significance of the Delta history, the Chinese history. Since the beginning of the Qing Dynasty, 1644, Chinese were determined to overthrow this dynasty because Qing Dynasty was the governance of the Manchurian people. They were the nomads in the north who managed to conquer China and govern the entire China. The indigenous Chinese people Han blamed them for the tyranny, mismanagement of the country, and China fall behind the Western powers. and subject to all kinds of humiliations. Well, why is this relevant to America? It's because the 260 years of revolutionary effort was finally made successful by Dr. Sun Yat-sen in 1912. Well, Dr. Sun grew up in China, but spent the character formative years in Hawaii, attending both the Lani and Punho. And this latter is the school that President Obama attended. While in exile, he came to the Delta on numerous occasions to raise funds from the Chinese laborers for the cause. Dr. Sun's village of his origin is very same village of the people of Cortland and Locke. And it explains why he was assisted by the Chinese people of Cortland. So may I show the picture of the old Cortland? Yep, that's the middle one. Okay, yes, that's. Oh, sorry, you are showing the top one. Okay, yes. So Cortland is the less known city in the Delta, which was enjoying bustling activities of the Chinese laborers, and it is also the time that entertained and received the revolutionary figure, Sun Yat-sen. So Sun Yat-sen has got a Western education, and he has got all the ideology, and he was always in leading the revolution. But he was also in exile. So he came to the Delta to raise funds. And this is all very important linkage between Delta and China and China's history. Okay, well, now we are in the process of collecting evidence here because his activity was deemed secret. He was wanted by the Qing government. The merchant community, the establishment in San Francisco took side with the Qing emperor. Therefore, his activities in the Delta was secret, and the hard evidence required our efforts to research and collect. Well, in 1912, after Dr. Sun's revolution that overthrew the Qing dynasty, he was made the founding father of modern China. He is well respected by both Communist China, the present regime of China, as well as the nationalist government, which is the government of today's Taiwan. So he is really the founding father of both modern China. And then this guy who used to come to Delta for all the funding of his revolution. All right, so I'll show you a picture of how he was respected by the two government, two administrations. So that's the picture in the bottom. Can you show the picture in the bottom? Yep, sorry. So the top one is obviously the Communist China circa 2018, and the bottom one is the Taiwanese government. So his time, his importance is time tested. Well, the connection between modern China and Cortland is reflected by the fact that the very first batch of Chinese Air Force pilots were trained in Cortland by an American. His name is Harry Abbott, a flying circus man who later was ranked Lieutenant Colonel of the Chinese Air Force. He's a man who trained young Chinese pilots and later went to China and helped fund the Air Force. So I showed the top picture is where the young pilots were trained and having a field day in Cortland. Yeah, that's the top picture. Is that the bottom picture? Sorry. The picture of the plane. Sorry. Okay. Anyway, I just go move on. Well, there are documents showing how the Chinese government bought the Curtiss JN-4 planes. Extensive training was carried out over the farmland in the Delta. When the training was complete, the young pilots performed an impressive graduation air show to the public. Then they packed the planes to be shipped out to China. The night before the shipping out, a mysterious fire broke out and engulfed all the planes. Fortunately, nobody was injured. It was well publicized in the newspaper. These are all stories waiting for us to tell. And we have important calling ahead of us. Well, the Chinese American community does not have a Martin Luther King, nor do we have a Cesar Chavez. There's no known street bearing a Chinese name, let alone a town. Delta is the only region that carries the footprint of the American Chinese. All the Chinatowns in the major cities are merely parts of the city. And original Chinatowns in Los Angeles, Stockton, and Sacramento, they were all systemically, slowly, gradually removed. So while all the attention was paid to the movement of the Black Lives Matter, it may result further branching out of the Chinese American legacy. Delta may be the only place that offers the sanctuary. The wholeness of Delta is all important to the Chinese American legacy. The wholeness is the Delta's wildlife, the salmon runs, the Pacific flyway for the migratory birds, people's enjoyment of recreation, the agriculture, and the pride of America owning this jewel of the nature. These have everything to do with the quality of the water in Sacramento River. I therefore urge you to protect the way of life here in the Delta and the wholeness of Delta. Well, that's about it. Do you guys have any questions? Can you move? Do I get any questions?
Any questions from any of the board members? It really was an excellent presentation, Doug. Let's go ahead and ask David now if he'll give his.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it very much.
So David?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and you can go ahead and share, okay?
Okay. Everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Yep.
Great. So I'm gonna just 3 basic sections. I'm gonna fill you in a little bit about myself, maybe a few perspectives, and then a primary suggestion for the board to consider. So regarding myself, I've lived here on Bethel Island 20 years or so, homeowner. We love the island. I look out at the Delta water every day. I'm an active boater, water skier, fisherman. My boys are wakeboarders. Kind of raised them here. They consider themselves Delta grown, basically. By training, I am an engineer. So nuclear and mechanical, Rensselaer and MIT. I was always around flows, energy, and the environment, and moved into being an entrepreneur of such, and actually got involved with software. How can you not in Silicon Valley? But got involved with environmental software and software as a service, and recently retired. So got more time to spend on things like this. I did become active with DWR around the False River barrier. I can pretty much see that location from my house. I attended some meetings where DWR was initially presenting the project, and they hadn't really done as much modeling as maybe they should. And so had some questions for them, ended up getting to know the modeling team pretty well, and started to hash out what that barrier might do to some of the flows around some of the islands and some of the effects. and actually with eyes on the ground here and me being so close when it did go in, and there were certain flows that were arising by some ferries and such, you know, I was able to give a heads up to the team on issues. And kind of led me to another position in terms of the Franks Track project that's out here. I'm on an advisory committee for that. So near and dear to my heart. And so why am I volunteering my time? Is probably pretty obvious. I want to, you know, help minimize any negative effects that this project might have on the Delta. I think we've already, you know, had some successes in that area with some of my feedback. And I'd also like to see the project deliver the maximum it can to the region in terms of infrastructure, recreation, education, social benefits, and the like. I think, you know, it's going to be a very significant effort. And I think this region could use an economic shot in the arm and, you know, an improvement in a lot of its infrastructure and resources. The situation on the ground here on the Delta, I'm sure you're aware of it. There's a lot of distrust in this region about, you know, this area being hurt economically so that other areas can be, you know, improved regionally than their economics and such. So you know, there's a seeing that we're getting hurt and other areas are benefiting. I've got a little bit of personal experience in this, having been here for 20 years. I've actually seen, you know, the reduced fishery and the poorer water quality. And I'm not, you know, going to point fingers or anything, but, you know, there's a lot of, you know, evidence that, you know, it just shows up right in your face. I mean, I'm seeing algae flecks coming from other areas in the Delta now, and started a couple weeks ago where, you know, a few years ago, I didn't see those until, you know, late August, early September, later in the season. So I would like to point out that you know, people in the Delta have, you know, a passion for this area. You know, they were living it and breathing it. And there is a perception that the, you know, people on in the water districts and sometimes working on these projects, you know, there's a job to be done, and it's a career and you know, a lot of impressive people doing things. And it's a, you know, a different item. I think the Delta is quite blue collar, and, you know, when meetings are going on during the day, they can't really show up at them. They're off working, but they do have passion for, you know, weekends and, you know, Facebook postings, and, you know, there's a lot that go on, primarily because they live here, raise their families here, have ancestry here, as Douglas just pointed out. You know, so we've got a lot invested in the area. So the SEC is a great process. Privately, I worked in a similar environment with some industry groups to solve problems before, so it's something I'm a bit familiar with. I think this definitely will reduce community problems down the road as, you know, a project, if it goes ahead and things start being built, you're going to not stumble on some things that you might have otherwise without this input. And we've already seen the results, as I mentioned. I was raising the flag on the Bolden Island barge landing, which was initially discussed, and it was going to be right in the middle of a place that we call the bedrooms out here on Potato Slough. And it's a pristine little area where lots of boaters go, a lot from the city, actually. They sail up here in the summer, and it's called the bedrooms because it's a series of little islands that provide shelter from the winds, and people will spend the night there, or spend a week, their summer vacation. There's boats out there right now. And so, you know, we were able to, you know, talk with the group, and it looks as though, you know, that landing was eliminated the last I heard, and you know, problems were solved without that, using some other methods. And I believe there was a shaft location near Discovery Bay that was presented as an issue, and I think there were some changes based upon that. So there's proven results, and I encouraged folks in the last meeting that there should be flyers put out, you know, with some of the benefits already that are resulting from, you know, this stakeholder engagement. And it's important to get that story out there, because even for people like myself participating, it's pretty challenging, both, you know, with friends and colleagues and neighbors here. I've been spoken to by my, you know, county supervisor, you know, with a little bit of a feeling like, hey, why are you helping these guys? You know, we're against this project. You know, what are you doing? It's kind of like we're traitors. So it's, my personal feeling is it's being built in my backyard. I want to make sure, you know, the negative effects are mitigated and the area benefits. And I I present to people that I, respect, sometimes support their protests, their opposition to the tunnels. I'm sensitive to that. At the same time, we have to be able to walk and chew gum. And if this is going to go forward, I want to make sure we're positioned to get the most out of it for the area. So that's kind of the role that I figure that I'm taking. By being here and doing this, I feel like I'm demonstrating some empathy. You folks have jobs to do. The DCA has a job to do. You're all professionals. You're going to do the best to build this, safely and make it an asset to the area. And I really do think on the flip side that the DCA, DWR, the water districts need to do a good job of showing their empathy for the region and highlighting that and starting, the SEC is a start, but even more so with some of you people out at meetings and talking. And it can be, challenging at times, but I think it's important to, make some of this. I know, Mr. Estremera, in your first meeting with us, our first SEC meeting, you took the time to highlight earlier in your life, I don't remember the exact project, but it was a project that you were associated with or around, and you saw that the community maybe didn't benefit the way it should have by this public project that went on. And I was moved by it. You were a little bit emotional when you were talking to us about it. And I thought that was terrific, that there's some empathy there. And I want to encourage you to keep, have more of that. I would like to see that not these things just, don't just talk about them. Let's make them important. Let's make agendas that have line items to discuss these benefits and, budgets that have line items to talk about them. And just like you're getting specific with, some of the tasks, and I know you get a job to do to meet deadlines and things like that, but I think there should be room soon to be able to identify projects and tasks and benefits and be able to quantify them. And there is an example of this in my lifetime. So I wanted to share this with the group. So when I was a little boy back in Irving, Massachusetts, a small town not unlike the ones that are here in the Delta, I didn't realize the foresight that some of the people that were working with that project must have had, because it was a pump storage project and it delivered a lot of benefits. And I highlighted this slide. I pulled it out of Wikipedia. You can look up this, and it's, it started in 1964. They were doing planning, and it went online in 1972. And you can see First Light Power Resources, actually the current owner of this pump storage project through some acquisitions and such. And that little town of Irving that's up there. And you can read about this project. But what I want to highlight is there were 4 recreation successes with that. Commitments that I would imagine were made that went along with that project. And as a boy, I saw these built and I used them. And when I go back with my family, I still go there. And what's fascinating is First Light Energy that built this project 50 years ago manages it. And I would imagine if I did some digging, we'd find that as long as that project's going, the owner of that project's responsible for the maintenance and the continuation of these facilities, which are really outstanding. And they're assets to the region, and a lot of people really enjoy them. And so you can even go to their Facebook page today, 50 years later, and First Light is managing it, but you can, go cross-country skiing there. There's, boating, there's picnicking, kayaking, all types of things. And I think this is the type of thing that should be getting more exposure here in the Delta, and to try to start to, identify some of the ways this project can give back to the Delta if there's other things that are maybe being taken away from the Delta. So I think it's an opportunity to identify the opportunities now, start to make the development of these, as important to they're more important to the people of the Delta, and we're not going to, see the extra water for the most part. We're going to be, challenged with maybe some of the leftover effects, which people are fighting about. So maybe there's some opportunity to show some positive aspects. And I think it would be great to have the entities that are doing this take some responsibility, not just for their construction, but for future operation and keeping them successful within the community. So that's the message that I wanted to give. And thanks for the opportunity to present it to you.
Well, thank you for that great background in history and the things you've been doing. Any questions from the board?
I'd just like to make a comment.
Sure.
I'm amazed at some of the things that have come out of some of the board members, and Mr. Glosky especially. You have been very amazing with some of this, because we really have made some changes as a result, and it is impressive that there is a project that many folks are very much against, and yet they are still trying to see if there are mitigations, if there are things to do, and make really constructive critiques and suggestions. So I thank you for that. I know we all do. So thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on to agenda item 8 now, the staff reports and announcements. First, we'll go to the General Counsel's report, 8A.
Thanks, President Atwater. My report is in the packet and it's up on the screen. I'd be happy to answer any questions on it. I did want to note one thing, which is actually not in the report. As Nasli alluded to in her report, we are monitoring the governor's announcement to reinstitute some of the restrictions and some of the associated local orders with that. And we'll make sure that the DCA remains in compliance and is practicing best practices around that.
Okay, good. I'm glad. I just would have assumed that, but I'm glad you reported. Let's go on to the Treasurer's report.
Good afternoon. Claudia, do you have it up?
Yep, it's up.
All right, thank you. So thank you, first of all, for nominating me back to be your treasurer the next couple of years. I thank you for doing that. And I also want to thank my staff, Bernadette Robertson and her staff, for all the hard work that they do for the agency. And I have a good faith that we will continue to do that in the next couple of years. Today we have a report, a little slight difference from what I usually report to you. First, this is the end of the year, so we have a preliminary financial statement. So I will speak to that in a minute. But first, for the month of June, we started the month with $796,714, and we ended with $723,240. That is the cash we're holding to date. Remember, we had $800,000. We have spent a little bit because of some decision the board had made and payments that we will not be reimbursed back by the DCO. So that is why we're not at 800. And we will always update you when we do those payments that you authorize that are not sometimes subject to reimbursement. Additionally, during the month, we did make some payments and received additional monies from the DCO. So as of July 9th, we ended up with $750,400. So that is the money we had as of July 9th. Now to the statement, the preliminary statements that you have, we have started, I believe this week, or we are starting our audit for the year, which we will present when those are presented to us. And those will be finishing the year for 19-20. So the preliminary net position showing as of this report is about $34.8 million. It's our net position. That number, and that includes our construction in progress and our prepaid expenses. Now, what's missing in this number is the DWR expenses. We are looking for them to give us any expenses they have. If they do not have them, then this will probably be closer to the number you'll see at the end of the year, but I probably believe they have some expenditures. So if they do, we will update that as we bring your audit sometime in the next few months. And so we have included schedules that show the details on attachment 1 and attachment 2. And that's my report. Happy to take questions.
Great, thank you so much. Any questions from the board? Hearing none, we'll move on to 8C, the DWR Environmental Manager Report.
Thank you, President Atwater. So my report is up on the screen, and a few things to highlight. Last Friday, we released the scoping summary report that documents the process we went through for scoping as part of CEQA, and it also includes as attachments all of the comment letters received and the transcripts from the public meetings. So the information on all of the scoping comments received is available to the public. Additionally, last week, we finalized the initial study and mitigated negative declaration for the soil investigations. Andrew was talking about this earlier. So there are still some sites that require additional permitting that we're working on. So those sites cannot begin until those additional permits are completed, but the ISMND is a good step in moving forward on the soil investigations. And then the last issue in my report is that the last time I was here, we talked about the idea that DWR submitted a Section 404 permit application to the Corps as part of the process to formally engage the Corps under NEPA. The Corps has replied to that with a letter saying that they are going to prepare an environmental impact statement. That letter is on our website, and as part of that, we're expecting them to develop and publish a notice of intent sometime later this summer and start scoping under the National Environmental Policy Act. So these are some major activities that have been completed within the last few weeks. In general, we're working on completing the CEQA documentation, or really starting the CEQA documentation. And one of the key things we've been working on is alternatives formulation. And so we're going to provide an update on that next week during the Stakeholder Engagement Committee meeting, so that as we ask the DCA to work on design of additional alternatives, the stakeholders will understand the design work that is moving forward.
Very good. Thank you very much, Carrie. Any questions from the board? Well, good luck next week. You got a lot going on.
Thank you.
Future agenda items. Oh, excuse me. 8D, verbal reports, if any, by anybody else.
Well, I have one.
Oh, all right.
Okay, it's just a quick one. I was not the only one who attended it. I know we had other members attending, but there were two presentations called Reframing a Region, Communities of Color in the California Delta, and it kind of goes on top of what Dr. Shea was speaking of. And basically they highlighted kind of a history of like the Chinese, the Japanese, the Filipino, Hawaiian, and of course Native American histories of folks in the Delta and what their histories were. It was both edifying and shocking in some cases, and disturbing. But you can access them if you wish to see the what this was about in terms of the history lesson. And if you just go ahead and Google Reframing a Region, Communities of Color, you can get on YouTube the presentations are there, and I do recommend that. It's quite interesting in terms of things that I had no idea, and so I found it very edifying. That's it.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. So you can just Google that, and you can find it pretty easily.
Yeah, it'll be a couple of YouTubes that come up. It's Reframing a Region, Communities of Color in the California Delta. There's a part 1 and a part 2. They were initially going to do it for 1 week, and they decided that they really needed to hear more from some of the other people that were there. And a couple of them are on our SEC, in our SEC community, part of our group. And they did a lot of research, a lot of original research, and it was quite interesting. So I recommend it.
Great. I just Googled it, and I think I found it. Thank you so much, Sarah, for suggesting that.
Mm-hmm.
Any other verbal reports?
I just would like to thank both Doug and David today, and all the other SEC members that have presented. And Doug, the history of the Chinese in the Delta, the community in Locke and Cortland, I really appreciate you sharing that history, and it's something that I think about often as we're doing this project. And as David mentioned, having empathy for the Delta and making sure that this is more than just a tunnel project on our part, I think those are really powerful points. So I really appreciate you guys bringing those up, and I thank you guys for the time. Sorry we went so far over. We took up quite a bit of your time till we got to you, but I just want to make sure that they know I appreciate it, and the comments are very helpful. both to DCA and I know to the board here and as we move forward. So thank you.
Great. I agree with your comments, Catherine. Any future agenda items that anybody would like to suggest for the August meeting? Hearing none, then we are adjourned. Again, thank you very much for all presentations. They were excellent.